So what we're doing now is we're jumping forward. You guys have heard a lot of information the last couple of days, and we're going to make the assumption that you have talked to one of the reps from either company, and you've made the decision that you are going to purchase some product, and now you're sitting there and you're saying, now what? What I want to do is I want to go through the process of setting your equipment up for application. Some of the problem shooting that we have encountered, and the solutions for that, the things to watch for, and now the rubber meets the road. You got to make it happen. So one of the first things that we want to talk about, and it was briefly mentioned last night. Okay, we'll introduce Greg, which I'm sure all of you know. Greg is with Brix Manufacturing. Dallas also with Brix Manufacturing. Is Lori here yet or not? No. And I know I've seen Cindy walk into the foyer there, so she's there as well. One of the things that we have encountered, and I think Glenn can attest to this, is your water quality. The calcium is a very electrical product, and when we are applying it to the soil, it can do some amazing things. However, if your water is not appropriate, it can tie up the energy part of the calcium before it even hits the soil. So what we want to do is make sure that you know what your water quality is like. We're looking for high bicarbonates and high sulfates. Okay? If you've got those in your water, and make sure you test for this. If you haven't got the number, make sure you test for this. Do not make assumptions. And there are things that can be done to treat that, or maybe you need or can have a different water supply, but make sure that you know what that number is. And I cannot stress that enough. We always talk about mixing order. And this is not just a suggestion. Usually we have one or two guys that say, well, it doesn't make any difference. This is after years of working with the products, putting them together, and we know what works and we know what doesn't work. And there's many times that if you do not follow the instructions, you will only do that once. And usually we get a phone call that isn't necessarily appropriate, and why did this happen? And we walk them through, and once the instructions are followed. So again, cannot stress that enough. On our side of it, we are making a conscious effort that every time we talk about the product, so on your order, when you order, on the mixing instructions, when you see the programs in those sheets that you may have, and if you've got some of the older sheets, it might not be in the right order, but the new ones now, we've got everything listed in the mixing order. So if you are using, for example, only the calcium and starting from there, then you mix the calcium first. If you are using the Zoomzol in it, or the silica, you have to mix the silica first. So we will always have that. If you're not using the silica, we'll just jump to the next section. Cindy, before you sit down, just to introduce you, Cindy with Bacteria Root Soil Solutions. Thank you again for your part in all of this. Okay, we're going to jump into some of this. Okay, we're going to talk about agitation, and many of you have heard this, and I'm not talking about the mental kind of agitation, although if you don't do it properly, you will have that kind of agitation. When you're mixing your product, make sure you got sufficient agitation. Now this is just a mix tank here, but what you've got is you've got approximately 45 or 50 gallons of water in there, and you can see the ripple effect on the top of that solution. That product is moving quickly in that tank. When you've got your product in your sprayer, or in your mix tank, or in your batch tank, whatever it is, you want to make sure that everything is moving properly. We've got a lot of rules that we follow or that we tell people, and again, these are the things that we have found work. So we want to make sure that you're aware of these. In your handout, you will have a section, our white page, that had some of the mixing instructions for the in-row. The in-row is particularly important to follow the order. And there's also some frequently asked questions on the other side. So you can follow along, write notes on there, whatever you want. The first rule for organic customers, make sure that you have got all your paperwork in with your certifiers prior to sitting on the end of the field and wanting to put the product on. Okay? All the paperwork is available. There's usually no problem with that whatsoever, but you have to make sure that you do that ahead of time. Again, the water quality, I want to stress that again. Make sure that you know what your water quality is like. Water pH. Okay, we haven't really talked about this. Yes?
Yeah, you keep talking about water quality. Is it, has anybody done any work with just RO water, reverse osmosis water? Is it worthwhile to go that direction?
Yes, definitely it can be. Again, it's the high bicarbonates and the high sulfates that we're primarily concerned about. RO water definitely is an option. It's not always an option for everybody, so again, we need to try to work through that. But yeah, it is an option. Water pH can make a difference. A lot of waters, I'm from Manitoba, a lot of waters in Manitoba are close to 8, if not over 8 pH. Long before these companies even existed, I'm talking going back into the 80s and the 90s, and I lived in the conventional world, we were adjusting the pH of the water for our herbicides that we were working with. It wasn't widely talked about. A few companies, a few outfits were talking about it. It is a very, very important step. When we fast forward into working with these products that we're working with here, if you are having trouble mixing, the first go-to is adjust your pH. Very, very easy to do. We use citric acid. Do up the calculation what it takes to drop from whatever pH you are to approximately 6.5, and then just keep adding that every time that you mix up a new batch. This next statement is maybe a little bit self-explanatory, but again, it's something that we run into every once in a while. Make sure you know the mixing orders. Okay, we're trying our best from our side to let you know, to make sure that you know what that is. The other side of that is make sure you know how much product you need to add into your solution or into your tank. So if you're doing 100 acres with a batch, do the math, know what you've got or what you need to add, and put it in on a piece of paper so that you're not trying to calculate out while you're on the fly. What we have experienced sometimes is the process of mixing requires some washing, requires some rinsing of hoses. Certain products require a certain amount of water. Certain products require a certain amount of carrying capacity of that water to mix it up. And if you're not aware of what's happening, and you might start with a sprayer tank half full of water, because in the conventional world that's what a lot of people do, half or 3/4 full. And you find that the sprayer tank is full and you've still got lots of product that you need to add in yet. Okay? Be aware of that. Do the math. Know what you need to do. As an example, the Zoomzil needs to be added into 50 times as much water. So if you're putting 1 liter of Zoomzil in, you need to have 50 liters of water in the solution, or in the tank that you're mixing with. Everybody always says, we know that there's always a safety factor in this, we're going to cut that in half. We've already done that because the actual suggestion is 100 liters. So don't cut down from 50 times the amount of water for the Zoomzil. But again, when you're adding in several jugs of it, now you got to multiply and what that is. And that's just an example. As you're mixing, and we're talking about the mixing orders, and just visualize this with me in your systems that you have there. You mix up one product and you pump it into the sprayer or into your batch tank or whatever it is that you're using. And you're going on to the next one. And so you've closed the valve off, and you've opened up the clean water valve, and what's the first thing that comes through? A few gallons of the last product that you've got. Because the lines are still got some product in, the pump has still got some product in. And so depending on how your system is set up and how many feet of line you've got, you may have a little bit or you may have a lot. But when we're dealing with some products and we want to make sure, if the last product that you have mixed up is the phosphate, and the next one that you're mixing up is going to be the calcium for the next batch, and you haven't flushed those lines, you will have trouble. Because the calcium has to be mixed in before the phosphate. So again, just to be aware, familiarize yourself with this stuff at this time of the year. When to go and do this and figure this all out 2 days before you need it, you got lots of other things on your mind. We talked about the Zoomzil, the EPHOS or the soft rock phosphate. Water has got a carrying capacity. Many guys are using a tank similar to this to agitate and to dissolve the product. The ones that we currently have available are about a 60-gallon tank. You usually fill it up about 3/4, maybe 80% full, and you add product into it. Invariably, what ends up happening is somebody puts in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 bags of EPHOS into a product like this or soft rock. And the mixing process is extremely long. They get frustrated, they open the valve, they send it off to the sprayer, the bandwagon, the batch tank, and like that, your filter is plugged. Because you got an inline filter that's filtering everything before. What's happened is the product has not dissolved, hasn't fully gone into suspension, and you're pumping raw product carried by water, and you've plugged everything up. And you're not happy. What we're finding is that when you've got a tank like this with roughly 45, 50 gallons of water in it, 2 bags of the EPHOS dissolve very, very well. Probably take you a couple minutes to dissolve that. You fire it off into your sprayer, your batch tank, your bandwagon, whatever it is, and then you do another batch. And if you got to put in 6 bags of EPHOS for your field or your tank load, 3 times that will take 6, 7 minutes. If you add that 3rd bag into that first batch, you will find that your mixing time or your dissolving time might be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And you're frustrated because now a simple mixing process is taking you way too long. And you know that you're not productive until that unit is moving out in the field. So just be aware of this and make sure that you understand water has a carrying capacity and it will not dissolve infinite number or infinite pounds of product.
Lorne, is your question?
Yes.
Good question. So, in that 45 gallons, how many bags? So if you have someone doing it and it's going onto a truck, it's going out to the seeder's running, you could just have a timer. Tell your guy, set the timer, let it run for 10 minutes. So how much EPHOS could you get into that 45 gallons? Do you think? Do you have a number figured out? So because it would be better for me. My personal situation to just make 1 batch, let it sit for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and then pump it in because I have volume issues. I can only have so much volume. Right?
Yep. Understand. Every water is going to be different. So for me to tell you that you can put in 3 bags or 4 bags or whatever and just leave it run a little longer, it's not that simple. Every water has got a different carrying capacity. A lot of guys, what they're doing is they're setting up a batch tank. So if you've got 2 guys that are running in your system and you got 1 guy out in the field and you got another guy that's going to be doing the mixing, it works very, very well, and you'll see a picture in a little while where you've got a batch tank where you can be mixing all your product up into a batch tank that's got a separate pump on it that's agitating as you're out spraying or seeding or whatever it is. And when the unit comes back for a refill, it's just a matter of pumping it back in or pumping it from the batch tank into the sprayer. So if that's a problem, that's maybe something that you want to look at is setting up a batch tank. Okay, calcium needs to have 10 gallons of water. Every time we talk about gallons, we're always talking about US gallons. It needs to have 10 gallons of water for every 45 grams of calcium. So if you're putting 45 grams on, your carrying load is 10 gallons per acre. If you're putting 90 grams on, your carrying capacity or your carry is 20 gallons per acre. And you can do the math upwards of there. So just make sure that you understand that. The calcium must have the sugar applied with it. If you don't, you will only do that once. The sugar helps buffer the calcium from some of the minerals that are in the water. Okay? The fish, if you're using it, needs to be reconstituted before it is used. Okay? What you'll notice is the fish will segregate in the tank. There'll be oil that will float. There'll be several different layers, and that needs to be agitated and brought up. A lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll just take one of the hoses, they'll stuff it into the top, and they'll agitate like that. And I'm speaking from experience here. And you'll have one side of the tote that's brought back and reconstituted. The other side, you still got segregation happen. So we started working with these little pipes. This is just an example. You can build these yourselves. It's just a pipe with holes in the bottom, and it basically takes and brings all your product around, and you can reconstitute a tote of fish in maybe 5 minutes rather than an hour. Again, just a little hint that that works very, very well. Never, ever, ever, ever mix soft rock phosphate directly into a fish tote. If you, back in your school days, or if your kids in your school days, built this little science project and it was a volcano that would overflow, that's what you will have if you mix soft rock phosphate directly into fish. Okay? Again, it's one of those situations where you will only ever do that once. Okay, we talk about flushing the booms. Especially if you're using the soft rock phosphate. The soft rock phosphate is not a product that dissolves. It is carried in suspension in your solution. We talk about the agitation system, and we talk about making sure that you've got a good agitation to keep the product flowing in and recirculating in the tank. In the booms, as you are spraying, and I'm particularly talking about the sprayers because we do not use the soft rock phosphate in the in-row, but in the booms in your sprayer, when you are spraying the soft rock phosphate particularly, as time goes on during the day, you will have a little bit of product that will be settling in your booms. Okay? We tell you to flush your booms, and when we tell you to flush your booms, we're not meaning just running clean water through the nozzles. Okay, Tyler Smith out of Saskatchewan had a great example of this, and we're going to go and show you this. He had run clean water through his booms at the end of the day after he had done spraying, and then he went and he did the same thing again but opened the end caps. So understand that this was clean water that was coming through the booms first. Okay, why is it not? Valid? Video? Yeah, that's the video.
Watch this.
Watch this.
Good video, Tyler.
Slow motion. If I shut the volume off, if you turn the volume on. Well, I'll just describe it. What had happened is he had black solution that was coming out when he flushed with water just through each section. Okay? The assumption, Oh, here we are. So he opens up the valves and there's dark water. Again, remember, this was already flushed out with clean water just through the nozzles. And then the next section. If you leave that in the booms for tomorrow, or next week, or next month, or next year, you will have problems. Because what happens is this product will get picked up at some point in time, and you will end up with a problem, and nobody wants that. Okay, again, the comments that we talk about water volumes and pH and mixing order are not just mere suggestions. Make sure that you are following that. And these are all things that we have experienced, many of us personally, and we're just trying to make sure that your life is as problem-free as you can be. Okay, there are 3 main application methods. The product is either sprayed on with a sprayer, in row with a at the seeding time, or seed treated. Okay? All the rules pertain to all 3 of the systems. Some of the products are a little bit different because we're not putting on soft rock when we're working in the in row. Most of that is put on with the sprayer. But it's all the same. And again, make sure you calculate out what you require prior to heading for the field. Okay, there is information, each of your orders when they're sent out, or the invoices that are sent out, the recipes are part of that. And so you will have what your recipe is per acre. Do the math, figure it out. If you're doing 100 acres per load, 200 acres per load, 300 acres per, whatever it is, just make sure you know what the math is and be familiar with that. Okay, I want to go into some of the problems that we've experienced. All problems fall into 2 categories. Number 1, they're either mechanical, or number 2, they're human error. And I don't mean this next statement to sound cocky, but to this day we have not had a mixing problem that we haven't been able to resolve. So we're very, very confident in the products. We're very, very confident in the instructions that we give you. And there's usually some problems that are encountered on the way that may have just been overlooked, or maybe there's something that you can't see. But I want to spend a little bit of time, and this is really not a great picture, but it's what I could find that I didn't have to draw, and you really don't want to see my drawing. So we're going to work with this. Don't worry about any of the wording in it, because I'm not even sure that's written in English. But this is a sprayer, okay? And it doesn't matter what the color is. It doesn't matter if it's pull type or if it's self-propelled. It doesn't matter if it's a lawn sprayer. This is the basic sprayer diagram. You've got a tank, you've got a pump, and then you've got some sort of a system that distributes it, whether it's a boom on a sprayer or whether it's a distribution kit on your air drill. This is all the same. When you've got your product coming from the sprayer to your pump, do not have a filter system in that. Lots of sprayers have that. Lots of systems will put something like that in there. Remove that from there and bring it over to here. Okay? On this system here, they've also got one in what we call the agitation loop. And so the product is coming from here through the pump back into the tank, and this is your agitation. Okay? We don't want that in here. We want to have a filter in here. This is your valve, whether it's a mechanical valve, whether it's a solenoid valve, whether it's a button you push on the computer in the cab that operates a valve. This is your valve, and right behind that is where we want to have our first filter, our primary filter. And then usually what we try to do is have a secondary filter right after your boom shutoffs or your section control that's going to your drill or your booms or your nozzles. Okay? Screen size is always 50 mesh. We've had guys that have tried to go with a smaller mesh, and occasionally it works. Many times it creates a problem where it's filtering out too much product, and you're ending up having to clean your filters. Okay, in all of this that we are working with, set up a mix system that works for you. Okay, there is no one right way, there is no wrong ways. As long as it works for you, that is the primary thing. So whether you are a stationary system and you've got everything and you're coming back to the yard, this is a strawberry producer in southwest Manitoba, or you've got want to be a little bit fancier and you've got a hopper that you're putting bulk product in and it's on a scale, and you've got larger mixed tanks, this is over at Brad's place, or whether you've got a mobile system that's got, that can take you through a big part of the day when you leave in the morning with all the product that you need. Okay, they all work. It's just what you require and what you're needing. This is an example of a batch tank where there was a clean water tank at the back. There was another clean water tank on the front. Batch tank that matched the sprayer size. We were able to carry, I think it was 4 totes of tea along with us. On the other side, we had fish on there. That's mine, by the way. And then we had our hopper tank or our cone tank where we used for mixing. This system had 3 pumps on it. One that did the mixing of the calcium, the mixing of the phos, and also moving the tea from the totes into the batch tank. There was another pump that was dedicated for the batch tank. It was constantly running as long as there was product that was in the batch tank, and it was keeping that agitated. The third one, because I love working with fish so much, is I had one dedicated to the fish. I did not want to be hooking and unhooking hoses. I did not want to have any physical contact with the fish any more than I absolutely have to. So I had one tank that was dedicated for this. I had one of those mix sticks that I showed you earlier on in there so that I could hook my outlet pump, or outlet hose of the pump to that top of that and agitate it, turn a valve, and pump it into the top of the batch tank there without having to physically contact that. And there's a story behind that I'm not going to talk about, but it involves my wife. If you want to know about it, you can ask me later. This is a filter. You will have product that will batch up in here. We want to make sure that this is acceptable. Okay, we want to set this up so that you might have to clean this filter out every 800, 1,000, 1,200 acres. Okay, you don't want to be having to do this every 150 feet because that gets old really, really quick. Okay, so what's one of the things that we look for when we start seeing products starting to filter out too quickly? Okay, first go-to is your water pH. If you haven't adjusted your water pH, that's one of the first things that you want to do. Next thing you want to do is to take a look at your mixing order or things that you were doing there. The next problem that we've got is, or the next problem that solves is we've got too little water volume. Okay, we're not having enough carrying capacity. It's not fully dissolving and it's plugging the filters. Okay, these are 2 examples, and if you've been here before, if you've talked to me even once, you've heard me talk about the 2 types of agitation systems. One being the jet style, one being the sparge tube type. And again, if you want to know the difference between these, you can talk to me afterwards, and I'm not going to beat this to death. But this is a sparge tube. This is a tube that's laid at the bottom of the tank or near the bottom of the tank. There's little holes. You can see where these little white spots are. There's little holes on the side that pump the product, and it circulates both ways like that. This one here is an example of a jet stud. So you've got a jet here. There's another one just out of the picture over here. This product is moving fast. Okay, it's coming up almost halfway up the tank. So capacity is not the problem. This was still causing problems with settling out and wasn't enough agitation. So what you had is you had a dead spot up here. You had another dead spot out here. And if you were even a little bit familiar with tanks, you know that right about here is where the sump is, where it's pulling product. So if you've got product that's settling out here, or you're driving across the field and it's sloshing, and all of a sudden some of this stuff breaks off and slides down into your sump, you're going to plug your filters like right now. Okay? We can take a system like this, pull this out, put a hose or a pipe on top of it with a couple of fittings, drill a few holes. You can change it from one to the other with maybe $50 worth of product or supplies. So it's not hard to do, but again, if you're buying a sprayer, if you've got a sprayer, whatever it is, make sure which one you've got, and if it needs to be converted, make sure that you look at doing that.
Lauren, there's a question.
Yes?
What size hole do you want to drill that pipe?
Mark, what size did we drill?
3/16.
3/16 holes. Yeah. Yes?
How far apart?
Usually about 6, 7, 8 inches, something like that, and we staggered it.
On both sides?
Good question. Yes, we're doing it on both sides. The closer your pipe is to the bottom of the tank, the more vertical that you drill the holes. So 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position. If it's up a little bit off the ground, off the floor, maybe 4 inches or 6 inches, you might need to put it at either 4 and 8 or 7 and 5, something like that, so that you don't have, you want to have as little area that isn't agitating as absolutely possible. Okay. The other problems that we have encountered are filters are too fine of a mesh. I mentioned that before. The product will actually filter out if you've got too far or too fine a mesh. The mixing order is wrong. If the mixing order is wrong, you potentially will have problems with filters plugging. The filter is in the wrong location. We've just talked about that. If you've got a filter that's in your agitation loop or in the suction line and you haven't got your product fully dissolved before it hits that filter, it will clog that up. And the problem that we encountered last year for the first time, Greg's going to be talking a little bit about this later, is with the extract, and that is the microbes were too active, and what was happening is we were having clogging or plugging of the filters much faster than we wanted to. I was told that there was a product that would run through an 80 mesh filter over there, but by the time it got over here, it wouldn't go through a 50 mesh filter. So again, we'll talk briefly about the application systems for the in-row in a minute, but we're just going through some of the products now, and that is one. Product settling out, okay, this is fairly simple. Your agitation is insufficient, or you forgot to turn the agitation system on, and that is a real thing that we from time to time do, is you get going and you forgot to turn the agitation system on. The product that was not fully dissolved, and again, the water pH may be too high. Okay, first go-to is always your pH of your water. If your nozzles are plugging, okay, you've either got too coarse of a filter, and there's too much product that's going, or too much unfiltered product that's going to the nozzles. The filter is missing, or the filter is damaged. I had one situation where a producer had done everything right as far as he knew. He had done the mixing properly, he had a good filter, or his filter was there, it was relatively clean. was using good water, everything was right, adjusting the pH, and he was still having problems with the filter plugging. And it was one of the situations where I actually had to go out and see him to try to resolve this. We pulled the system apart, and what had happened was the filter, at some point in time in the past, when it slides into the canister, it had gone in crooked. And most of these filters have got a plastic cage around it, and the cage had just a little bit of a dip in it. And so there was product that was going past the filter and going straight into the system that was not filtered. And so what we did is we got a new filter, we flushed everything out, cleaned everything out, and he had no more problems after that. The other one is the boom was not flushed out after previous application, and the product had settled in the boom and is being picked up by the water flow and plugging the filters. Okay, we talked about that. I had a situation where, again, we were spraying, and I finished up spraying the one night about 11 o'clock. The plan was to go out early the next morning to continue on. I did not flush the booms. The trouble was, tomorrow morning happened 5 days from now. And can't remember what it was, if it was a rain or something happened that delayed me from coming back and finishing up the project for 5 days. And let's just say 4 hours of the afternoon was wasted that day in cleaning out the sprayer because everything had settled and plugged, and you don't want to experience that. Okay, if the product is not dissolving or going into suspension, what is the first thing that we look at? Good. Okay, your water pH is too high. That's, again, the first thing that we want to look at. We're not mixing the product or agitating it long enough in the mix tank. Again, what we're doing is we're exceeding the carrying capacity of the water, and we're trying to dissolve too much product in too little of water. Okay, not enough water for the amount of product to be dissolved or put into suspension. We're trying to go with too little of a gallons per acre load or carry for the amount of product that we've got in. It's too thick. Okay, it's a gravy instead of a nice chocolate milk. Okay, another one that inevitably at some point in time you're going to run into this. You've got product that is foaming. Okay, first go-to is you have got an air leak in the suction side of your pump or in your hose someplace, but you've got an air leak in there. That's the first go-to. Solve that. Maybe it's a cam lock that's not tightening up quite enough and you need to tighten that fitting, but that's the first go-to. We talked about this. You do not want to be mixing soft rock phosphate directly into fish. I was trying to do that to short circuit the product and the amount of product that we're trying to filter. Same as your situation. I was trying to make a shortcut and it was foaming. And we had one incident where there was a little bit of miscommunication, and the customer was not using any water, and it was just dissolving product straight into the tea, and he had a horrible foaming problem. Make sure that you understand there will be water required in this entire mixing process. I forgot to go through. Where is some of this stuff? Okay. On the in-row, and this is where I really want you guys to pay attention. There are several variations of this type of system. This is the Pattison distribution system. It uses a small orifice there, and if you've got good eyes, those are two different sizes, depending on the flow that you're needing, but they're both a very, very small size opening. This is the Polywest system, previously known as the green drop system. It uses a pot with compartments and then a number of outlets that feed to each shank. This is a pressurized system up to this point, and after this, it's a gravity flow down to the shank. However, take a look at the orifice size. That compared to that or that. Okay? If you are using the extracts, we are strongly recommending to consider this system. These will either have the pipes coming off at from the side like this, or they'll have them going straight down. The ones that are coming off the side, the system is called a low profile. The pot can be a little closer to the frame of your unit. Again, these lines here that come off of here have to gravity flow down to the shank. So you can't have a dip in them. Okay, so again, understand the mechanics of where your machine is. If you're feeding a outside wing from a pot on the on the center section, make sure that the folding capacity works really well. I looked at a system one time where the unit literally folded in on top of each other. And I think it was the Morris Contour. There was no way that we were going to be able to use a system like this because it just did not work from a logistics standpoint. So there are limitations to this. This fitting here was not on the original ones. They had 4 holes just in the top here, and those are breather holes. And what they've done now is they've put this on, and then they run a hose down, and that is what they call the anti-drip. On the earlier versions of this, the green drop ones, worked really well on 3-section units, but as soon as you added the next section and run the other one, there was a tendency for product to drip when you were folding over. Okay, so these new ones now are much better. What we are finding, and I'm not 100% sure why Polywest is doing this, but there is a limited number of this available. What they've got in inventory, they're not building this anymore. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday talking about cutting one of these apart and maybe trying to recreate it with a laser or 3D printer. So you know, there's guys that are trying to figure out this part here might be the problem because there's internal stuff. Yes.
Have you ever heard of the metering tubes that should point?
Yes. Yes. And if you know some information about that, I'd love to talk to you. We were just actually talking about this last week at Ag Days in Brandon, Manitoba, because then you go away from this orifice, and it's the tube itself or the size of the tube. At least my understanding, it's the size of the tube that actually meters it. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's got a 300% bigger opening.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you got? You don't have an opening of this big, but you got an opening way bigger than that.
Oh yeah, you had the opening with that.
Yeah. So anyways, that is another one. I'd love to comment on it. I don't know enough about it, but we're looking into it. So I'd love to talk to you after about that if I could. That'd be great. Any other questions at this point? Okay, these systems work. If you are working with the extracts, I would lean towards this system. If you're working with the rest of the products, we know that the Pattison system works. We know that when we're using the T, it works very, very well. We're not putting the fish in row, or at least not a lot of it, and so we know that we're okay with this. Filtration becomes a much more important issue with the Pattison system than with this. My first experience with this was back in 1987, and we were using a product that was called fluid fertilizer. They were taking dry phosphate, dry nitrogen, dry potassium, and they were dissolving it or putting it into suspension. And we were running it through one of these systems, and it was working very, very well. So I know the capacity is there to do that. Again, the availability is one of the problems. Talked with these tend to be a little bit more money. Talked with one of my customers in Manitoba this morning. He had a 56-run unit. He was looking at running 4 pots of 14 openings. And his total cost before taxes was just a little over $2,400. So again, it's not something that's really expensive, but these ones here, just as comparison, we're usually running someplace around $45 a shank. So again, sometimes spending a wee little bit extra, if it works in your system, to try to solve some problems might be worth a few $100s extra. Any questions? That's the end of my presentation. I know we've covered a lot of stuff. If you want to talk to me later, one-on-one, I'd love to do that. Brad, I know has got a lot of experience with the mixing, and I know there's others in here that have got a lot of resources that they can assist you with as well. Any questions? Yes, Tanner.
So bandwagon is the best better because anybody feel their own.
Okay, good question. Is a bandwagon better? Does anybody build their own? If we go back to this picture here, this could be a bandwagon on wheels. This could be tanks mounted on your tractor. Talked to one guy, and he's looking at putting a tank on a 3-point hitch on his tractor, which is then going to be attached to his planter. This doesn't matter. Figure out what size you need for what you want to do. If you want to load up in the morning and be gone for the day, you're going to need a larger tank size than if you're only going to be seeding 60 or 70 acres in a day, and you're willing to stop, for afternoon coffee break and fill up again. The Zoomzil, the humic acid, the calcium, the sugar, the EPHOS, and the microbial tea. Normally that's what's going in your in-row. That product has got very little settling out, and the little bit of sloshing around that happens as you're lumbering across the field is usually sufficient to keep that in suspension. If you've got product in the bottom of your tank and it gets dark, or you just want to go home for the evening, you may have a little bit of settling out in the morning, and usually what there's a pump on here that sucks from the bottom and pumps back into the top. Start that up, let it run for 15 or 20 minutes, or maybe a half an hour as you're fueling up or whatever you're doing in the morning, and that's usually sufficient to get it back into suspension. So it's not nearly as important on the in-row stuff. Okay, there's another question. Yes?
So just back to the Patterson system in there, or whatever. So has anyone ever used, because Patterson also sells like a manifold with orifices, right? I mean, you can't change your rate.
Yes.
You can't change all the orifices, so do you have any experience with that?
So what we've got, so the question was, can we put a bigger orifice and change our rates? Normally we're running in around that 8 to 10 gallons in the seed row. And what the question was is, can we up our rate, our application rate?
Is that not the variable rate nozzle?
That's not the variable rate nozzle, no.
Oh, okay, so that is one of the orifices.
This is the actual orifice and they sent me one of each just to compare sizes.
Okay.
But that is, and can we increase that orifice size by increasing the rate? My understanding is that was what's happening last spring. There was, and you can maybe raise your hand if it was you, but they were going up to 30 gallons of carry on their in-row just to get the orifice size larger so that they could get around the plugging part of it. Good question. Again, that will also dictate how big of a tank you want to be carrying around behind you as well. So, any other questions? Yes?
How long can you let a fish sit before you have to feed it again?
If your fish is reconstituted properly, you usually got a few days. You might start seeing a wee little bit of settling out, but if it is done properly, you should have a few days to do that. So it's not that you got to be doing this every 20 minutes or every hour or every 2 to 3 hours. I would mix up the fish, and it was fine for at least a couple days, and by then it was usually used up. So. Okay, if nothing else, I want to hand the mic off to Greg, and he's going to be talking about the extracts. So, Greg.
Thanks, Mark. I'll just be quick. I don't have anywhere near the information that Lorne has to go through. But the biggest thing with the extract is the cost of extractors. When I first got into this with the Soil Food Web, one of the guys bought an extractor with stainless steel and the whole bit and paid $75,000. That'd be 2001. Glenn put one together that he threw his Bio 5 extractor. It's got tanks, pumps, the whole bit, and it's 50,000 or a little better. But what you can do, Lorne, could you go back to your first slide? Okay. I'm just talking about the extractor for the compost. What we've been using for the tea and whatever, we just use a cauldron like this with
This one?
yeah, and we just drop it right into this. About three pails, so that would be about 120 pounds of compost. Ideally, it's screened, so you have your 60-gallon tank, and you have your whatever that you have a hopper cone full of water. We put a 2-inch line to the bottom of this, fill it up, and then put on the flow of water, and it takes 3-4 minutes, and you will, all of the particles that are small enough that will go through this will go into your tank. And with that hopper tank, if you have air, because it's that's kind of the next step, because you have the particulate matter that goes through here. If you have the air that goes through there, the air creates turbulence and knocks the rest of the biology off of your particulate matter that's inside your tank. Rotate that or for 15 minutes, and then shut it off for 10 with your hopper cone, and the majority of your particulate matter will settle out. You will draw off a little above that, and then when you take that out, even with that, I was talking about those very expensive extractors, once you extract it, you still have to filter it before you put it into whatever system that you have that you're putting it through. So this is a bag that Andrew was talking about yesterday that he uses, and he just puts it on a clamp on a 2-inch line, slides that over and puts another one on that, and depending on how clear that is, or just do you have a picture of your of the pump from the oil field?
I do.
Yes. So there's equipment filters that from the oil field that can come through. So you can put this all together with tanks and everything. You can be in 15,000 with a couple 1,500-gallon tanks on hoppers. And the whole deal with this is it's very, very quick. You could do, if you have a 1,500-gallon tank, you could, and then with 3-inch lines in between, you could do 1,500 gallons every half hour. And that's the biggest thing with in the spring, because everybody's in a hurry. You know, you want to get things done so you can keep it going. So this, the other, before what's talked a lot about is those bags, those tea bag type deals that you put your compost in and then dunk them. So you're going over the top and you're dunking them and they're slow and they're, whereas this, with this type of tank, this can be done 3 minutes, and you can have all of your castings or your compost or whatever, everything extracted and then into the tank that you can control it there. So we found that saves a whole lot of time to get it done. I don't have nice pictures like Lorne does. This is, we just have a little system, but we don't have it, but I've seen this other put together, and of course I did take the pictures. Does anybody have any questions on that? Because the extracting is, yes?
What kind of size of mesh is that?
I knew that was going to be asked and I was going to measure it.
60.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. But for ease of handling, instead of the sack that they have for the tea bag, to take that out, to clean it each time, to pull it out, it's kind of a hassle, whereas this, you just have handles, you pull it up, you dump it, and you're not working off ladders or off a height, you're just, Mike.
Would you the cyclone thing, like Brian was using that to get the stand up, would you need that still? Or what's it called?
The hydrocyclone,
Would you still need that? Or would it be okay without that?
it all goes on your time. Like your hydrocyclone will take out your particulate matter, and do you find that if you let it set for 10 minutes that your sand will come out?
Yeah, like the hydrocyclones are supposed to be, so it'll, whatever drops out in 2 minutes, right, all your heavies.
Yeah.
But I still find like plant material, like anything that'll seep through, like go sideways through your filters and stuff, it'll still catch it in the hydrocyclone, which then takes the load off your filter before you go in, right?
Yeah.
So every little bit helps, right?
Yeah. The hydrocyclone also, if you have time, because we've talked about this before, if you're circulating your water with a vortex, that'll also absorb more oxygen. It helps with your water to carry more. And also, like Brian was talking yesterday, with a large air pump to put into the tanks. So I've seen them whereabouts they had a unit like this, and then two tanks. You have a hopper bottom, your 1500 that it goes into. You draw off the side, goes through a filter bag like this, or else something from the oil field, like the bag filters, that goes into your next tank. So you can run it all the way through. So you'd have 2 pumps, and you'd have 1,500 gallons that extracted and screened, ready to go into your unit in a very short period of time. So you can get a lot of gallons done in a short period of time. So and that's the biggest issue in the spring. Anything else? Yes.
Do you have water in the tank, or are you filling it through the top and then slicing it?
Put water in the tank, and then just run it through here to run it back in. Because it takes very little time. This takes far less time than it does to fill. You have a 3-inch line for filling your, say, a 1,500 gallon tank, and then a 2-inch for extracting out of this tank to. And then, yes.
Is there a ratio of how many gallons of water to pounds of compost, or is that self figure out for yourself?
Yeah, it's an artsy thing. It's a guess. There's no real science. If you're using vermicompost, you can be using different types of compost. So it all has kind of a different. What are you using, Brian, for your?
Like 80 kgs per 1,000 gallons. And then that's being applied at 20 gallons an acre. So that's roughly,
That's your pig compost?
that's what, yeah, with the pig stuff, yeah.
So it's 80 kgs. So
80, yeah, 80 kgs to make 1,000 gallons, and then that goes on at 20 gallons an acre.
So that would be 3 pails-ish, depending on the moisture of your compost, and that's what will fit in this. So this size filter would be good for 1,000 gallons. Yeah.
Yeah, my picture yesterday was 50 pounds for 350 gallons, where it had the brown, white brown. And I only go with air because I'm very simple. So I fill up my tank, I hang the bag at the top, which we use in a 50-pound bulk onion bag. And I just bubble for about 10 minutes, and then settle, and then gravity through the bag. So we lift up our tank with a forklift, and then we just gravity up through the bag. And I just looked at a chart, and that bag is very close to 140 mesh, because I go straight from that bag into my greenhouse system through 140 mesh with no problems. So just that's an example. So that's how simple it is for us on a bit of a smaller scale.
Yeah, like what the reason with the bag, because then you need something to hang over the top, and you have to have an open tank on the top, which is.
Yeah, we're set up for that already, I guess. We're
Yeah.
using it.
Again, whatever equipment that you have, we just found that this was easier, never on a ladder, and everything goes in.
Greg, is that?
Yeah.
Where do you buy those?
These.
And
This is just made this,
Yeah, the bags are from MasterCard. They're an American supply company of all sorts, and I think they're like $11 US.
Are they washable as well, or?
Yeah.
yes, they're washable, yeah. Anything else? Yes, thank you.
Great, we have 100 people sitting here, and the byproduct of this beautiful extract we're making is called pigs. So if everybody could go home to their communities and let their friends know that our little network that are composting with the pigs have a lot of pigs that need to be put into freezers. And if you can get a hold of anybody, any one of us, we can put you in contact with some great quality pork. So maybe if you want to mention that, that's.
Yes, there's about a dozen producers across the prairies now that have pig pens, that have raised pigs or are raising pigs. Some are going year round. So there is, and once you have the pork, you won't buy it from the store, but pork has a really, really bad name. It's really funny. It's really, really hard to market, but once people get this site, because it's outdoors, they're rooting the digestive system, whatever, the meat is more marbled and tastes quite a bit better. It's very distinctive, different than what you get from a barn pig, but it's, we haven't got the market set up, so if anybody has anybody that's interested in pork, all across the prairies, we have people doing this and on different sizes, and we're just working our way through that. So if anybody knows anybody that's looking for pork, let us know, and we'll, depends on where you are, that we can put you in touch with people that have hogs. Anything else?
Craig, one of the challenges I've been in, I was just running that wood basket or wood mesh bag. It's probably similar whole size to that screen. Is if we put the 3 pails of compost in and then circulate through it, it almost plugs off the mesh, and then it wants to come over the top. Like you have to circulate it really slowly at first until you get it.
There's a knack to that.
Yeah.
So what you do is you put we put our 2-inch line in first, right down to the bottom. But the question was, he was having trouble that once you fill this up for the line, then you put the water in and you plug in the sidewalls. So what you do is you put your 2-inch line right down to the bottom, put your compost in and turn your water on, and then you lift the hose, and it'll fall in underneath, and then you're pushing it out the bottom, and then it starts falling down, and you get up. It takes a little, but you start with the bottom, start with your hose in the bottom, otherwise it will plug the sidewalls. That's it? One more question.
Just on that, with that plugging, so aeration, once I change my system over to aeration versus just circulating, the aeration moves everything around more. Because like the Bio5 has that aeration in the bottom, right? And that's how that keeps the outer screen from plugging off. So if you're using like a basket or a bag or anything, you basically just need more agitation, right? From air, right? Just to keep everything moving around. And then it'll drop all that stuff off the inside of the bag.
Yeah, ideally, when you would have an air system in your first tank from when you have extracted this, and like you said, that creates the turbulence to take it off. You need big air. It needs a lot of air to create a lot of turbulence to get it off. What's the CFM of those pumps?
All the way up to like 1200.
Yeah, they're 1200 CFM, so it's a lot of air to put in there, a lot of turbulence, but the smaller ones don't get the job done to create enough turbulence to bring everything else down.
Pressure?
For the
air? Yeah, so like, they're only like 7 inches, 7 inches of air pressure, I think, or 7 feet. Because they're measured in like head height, right? where like Justin uses like a screw air compressor.
Industrial.
Yeah, an industrial one where they go up to like 130 PSI, right? And those, he has it coming in the top of the bag to get all this turbulence at the top, that's suspended in the top. Where, do you aerate in the bottom too, Justin? Maybe. Find out later.
No.
But mine is all like those air discs on the bottom. So it's actually micro bubbles coming in, and it's everything's being lifted, right? When I do higher rates of extract where I'm using like 100 or 120 kgs just to do like one really thick batch, you'll get more plugging in the bag, and if you can get air into the bag of some extent, then most of the problems just go away, right?
Yeah, part of that's the smaller bubbles,
Yeah.
the smaller high volume, smaller bubbles with the turbulence make everything quite a bit easier. Okay.
Thanks, Greg.